Millionaire hires a fake date. For his ex's party, she ends up stealing all attention. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, it is free, and it is the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories every single week. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us get back to our main character. His name is Julian West, a 34-year-old self-made tech millionaire based in Seattle. Julian is the kind of man who never does anything halfway. When he builds something, he builds it to last. When he loves someone, he loves with everything he has. Unfortunately, that is exactly what made his last breakup so brutal, because the woman he gave his heart to broke it and then announced her engagement 6 months later, not just to anyone, to the man she always told Julian not to worry about. And now, in a twist of fate, Julian had received an invitation to her engagement party. Most people would have ignored the invite or tossed it in the trash. But not Julian. That was not his style. Instead, he came up with a plan. He was going to show up, but he was not going alone. He wanted to walk in with someone so radiant, so confident, so breathtaking, that no one would dare pity him, and most importantly, his ex would see exactly what she had lost. But Julian had no time for real dating. He was not looking for love. He was looking for impact. So he did what any resourceful, emotionally bruised tech millionaire might do. He went online. Not to a dating app, but to a high-end companion agency. This was not the sleazy kind. This was discreet, professional, and extremely selective. The kind that caters to executives needing an intelligent +1 for corporate galas or social events. Julian submitted a profile, paid a ridiculous fee, and waited. And then she arrived. Her name was Amelia Hart, 30 years old, an aspiring actress with a degree in psychology and eyes that could freeze time. The agency said she was one of their best, witty, poised, adaptable to any social setting. Julian was skeptical at first, but during their video call, Amelia was everything the agency promised and more. She laughed at his dry jokes. She asked smart questions, and she understood the assignment perfectly. No strings, no expectations, she said, with a smile that seemed to hide 100 stories. Just two people playing a role, right? Exactly what Julian wanted. At least, that is what he told himself. What he did not know, what neither of them knew, was that this fake arrangement was about to spin into something far more real than either had prepared for. And it all started that Friday night, when they walked into the engagement party together. Friday evening arrived with the kind of golden sunset that made everything look like it belonged in a movie. Julian stood outside the entrance to the event venue, a luxurious rooftop lounge in downtown Seattle. The space had been rented out entirely for the engagement party. His ex-fiancée clearly spared no expense. It was extravagant, curated, and filled with people who once knew him as her boyfriend. Julian adjusted the cuff of his navy blue suit. His heart was steady, but his mind was rehearsing a dozen social scenarios. He had been in high-pressure boardrooms and on global tech stages, but this felt different. This was personal. This was emotional terrain. And then she arrived. Amelia stepped out of the black car like she had walked off the pages of a fashion magazine. She wore a floor-length emerald green dress that hugged her frame without screaming for attention. Elegant, poised, and entirely unbothered. She walked up to Julian, smiled, and whispered, "Ready to make your ex regret everything?" He smirked. "Let us do this." They entered the venue together, arm in arm. The moment they stepped inside, heads turned. Conversations dipped. Julian could feel the shift. Some faces lit up with curiosity, others froze with recognition. And then, just across the room, there she was, Natalie, his ex. She was laughing, holding a glass of champagne, her fiancé's arm wrapped tightly around her waist. But when her eyes met Julian's, her expression faltered just for a second. Then, the practiced smile returned, wider this time, almost defiant. Julian gave her a polite nod. Amelia followed with a graceful wave. They were not supposed to look threatening. They were supposed to look effortless. As the evening unfolded, Amelia played her part to perfection. She remembered names, she complimented outfits, she laughed at jokes that were barely funny, but she did it all in a way that seemed genuine, never forced. People gravitated toward her, not just because she was stunning, but because she listened, really listened. Julian, meanwhile, noticed something unexpected happening. He was relaxing. He found himself enjoying her presence more than he had planned. She would lean in occasionally, whispering witty observations about other guests. And every time she did, Julian laughed, real laughter, not rehearsed social armor. At one point, an old friend pulled Julian aside and said, "She is amazing, man. Where have you been hiding her?" Julian smiled. She is full of surprises. Meanwhile, across the room, Natalie kept glancing their way. Her laughter grew louder, her gestures more animated. It was subtle, but Julian recognized it. She was trying too hard. And he knew why. Amelia was not just holding her own, she was outshining everyone. Julian had hired a companion to help him save face. But now, he found himself wondering, who exactly was saving whom? Just as that thought crossed his mind, Amelia turned to him during a slow song and said, "Do fake dates dance?" He looked at her, paused, and then offered his hand. "Only if they promise not to fall for their partner." She grinned. "Deal." As they stepped onto the dance floor, under the soft glow of fairy lights, the music slowed, and for a brief moment, the whole room faded. Julian realized that the script was slipping. The plan was simple. Keep it fake, keep it safe. But from the way her hand fit perfectly in his, and the way his heart skipped with every step, they were already off script. And the night was far from over. The dance ended, but the tension in the room did not. Julian and Amelia stepped off the floor just as the crowd politely applauded the live jazz trio. From the outside, everything still looked perfectly under control. But beneath the surface, small fractures were beginning to form both in the room and inside Julian himself. They returned to their table, and before Julian could even sit down, a familiar voice called his name. "Julian." He turned. It was Derek, the fiancé. Natalie trailed behind him, still holding her champagne flute. Her smile was picture perfect, but her eyes said something else entirely. "Hey," Julian said calmly. Derek extended a hand. "Glad you could make it, man. It has been a while." Julian shook it firmly. "Congratulations to both of you." Natalie nodded, her gaze flicking toward Amelia with barely concealed curiosity. "And this is?" "Amelia Hart," Julian said, stepping aside so they could meet. "My date." Amelia extended her hand with a warm, practiced smile. "I have heard so much about this night. You both look incredible. Congratulations." Natalie shook her hand, but there was a tightness in her grip. Derek, on the other hand, looked genuinely intrigued. "So how did you two meet?" he asked, eyes darting between them. Julian opened his mouth to answer, but Amelia beat him to it. "A charity event," she said smoothly. "I was giving a talk on using theater in trauma therapy. Julian was one of the donors. We ended up stuck in an elevator for 45 minutes. We have been talking ever since." Julian almost laughed. Not because it was ridiculous, but because it was so well delivered, he almost believed it himself. Natalie blinked, clearly trying to hide her surprise. "That sounds intense." "It was," Amelia replied, her voice soft but steady. "Sometimes the best conversations happen in the strangest places." There was an awkward pause. Then Derek let out a short laugh. "Well, sounds like a better story than how we met." Natalie shot him a look. Julian smiled politely, but inside, something had shifted. This was supposed to be simple, controlled, performative. But Amelia was not just playing the role, she was inhabiting it. And somehow, she was changing the dynamics of the entire room. After the brief interaction, Natalie and Derek moved on to greet other guests. But as they walked away, Julian noticed something. Natalie glanced back. Not once, twice. Later in the evening, as dessert was being served, an older woman approached their table. It was Julian's former boss, Margaret, a powerful figure in the Seattle venture capital scene. "Well, look at you," she said, sipping her wine. "Julian West, with someone who finally smiles." Julian stood to greet her. "Margaret, this is Amelia Hart." Margaret sat down without waiting for an invitation. She leaned toward Amelia with interest. "Tell me, what is your secret? Most women at these events look like they are holding their breath." Amelia laughed. "Good shoes, low expectations, and knowing exactly when to disappear." Margaret laughed loudly. "You are sharp. I like that." Julian watched the exchange in silence, strangely captivated. He had brought Amelia here to play a part. To be polished, graceful, and convincing enough to stir envy, not connection. But what he was seeing now was something else entirely. She was not just performing, she was thriving. and it made him wonder how much of Amelia was real. Where did the act end and the woman begin? That question deepened when, later that night, they found themselves alone on the rooftop terrace. The music from inside drifted out gently through the glass doors. Amelia leaned on the balcony railing, the city lights reflected in her eyes. Julian joined her, hands in his pockets. "That elevator story," he said. "Do you just have those prepared, or was that improv?" She smiled without turning to face him. "Would you believe me if I said both?" "I might," Julian replied. Silence settled between them. Comfortable, electric. Then Amelia said softly, "Your ex is still watching us." "I noticed," Julian replied. "She does not look very happy. I am not sure if that makes me feel better or worse." Amelia finally turned to him. "You did not come here to win her back, did you?" Julian met her gaze. "No, I came here to win something back for myself." She nodded slowly. "Then maybe you already have." Julian looked at her for a long moment, and for the first time that night, he did not feel like he was pretending. The night had stretched longer than Julian anticipated, and yet he did not want it to end. Back inside the lounge, the crowd had begun to thin. Laughter softened, heels clicked more slowly, and the energy shifted from celebration to closure. Julian and Amelia lingered near the bar, sipping on sparkling water. They had played their roles so perfectly that no one had questioned them, not even for a second. But somewhere between the handshakes and small talk, something real had started to take root. Julian was not used to that. He was used to structure, control, calculated moves. And yet with Amelia, everything felt spontaneous, effortless, alive. A photographer approached. "Would you two mind one last photo for the couple's scrapbook?" Julian hesitated. Amelia stepped closer, her arm naturally sliding around his waist. "Of course! We would love to." As the flash went off, Julian looked down at her not just as a date, not just as a hired companion, but as someone who, against all odds, had turned this night into something meaningful. And just like that, the script collapsed. Later, while walking toward the elevator, Amelia turned to him. "You know, I have done dozens of these events before, but tonight felt different." Julian raised an eyebrow. "Different how?" She glanced at him, then looked away. "Less pretending, more being." He nodded. He understood more than he wanted to admit. As they stepped into the elevator, the doors slid shut behind them with a soft chime. Silence filled the space just like she had described in their fake story. Only this time, it was real. Julian turned to face her. "Amelia." She looked up. "Yes? There is something I need to ask. And you can be completely honest." She tilted her head slightly, curious. "Did you enjoy tonight?" he asked. Amelia smiled, but it was not the charming, polished smile she had worn all evening. It was something smaller, softer, more vulnerable. "I did," she said. "Too much, probably." Julian nodded slowly. "Me too." The elevator reached the ground floor. The doors opened, but neither of them moved. For a moment, it was as if the whole world paused. Amelia broke the silence. "We said no strings, Julian." "I remember," he replied. "And yet here we are," she said. He took a step closer, voice lower now. "Maybe the problem was thinking this would be just a role. Maybe I underestimated you." Amelia looked up at him, eyes searching his. "Do not say things you do not mean." "I mean every word," he said. "I'm just not sure what to do with it." She gave a small, breathy laugh. "Welcome to my world." The spell was broken by the sound of a text notification on Amelia's phone. She glanced at it. Her expression shifted. "It is my driver. He is outside." Julian nodded, suddenly unsure what to say. They stepped out of the elevator together and walked into the cool Seattle night. The car was already waiting. Amelia turned to him one last time. "I had a wonderful time," she said, voice calm but eyes conflicted. Julian wanted to say something, anything to keep her from leaving, but the moment slipped. He watched as she stepped into the car, the door closed, and the vehicle pulled away into the city lights. And for the first time that night, Julian felt something unexpected. He felt alone, not because Amelia was gone, but because for one brief evening, he had forgotten what it felt like to be alone at all. And now, with the party over and the lights dimming, he realized something even more startling. He did not want it to end like this. The next morning, the city felt quieter than usual. Julian sat alone at his kitchen counter, coffee growing cold in his hand. The sun had barely risen, casting long shadows across the hardwood floors of his penthouse. But it was not the quiet that unsettled him, it was the absence. Emilia was gone. Not just from the party, not just from his side, but from the role she had temporarily occupied in his life. And the strange part was, she was never meant to stay. He had drawn the boundaries himself. He had hired her, laid out the terms, even reminded her this was just a contract. But somewhere between the champagne toasts and shared glances, the rules had unraveled. Julian scrolled through his phone, stopping at the agency's contact page. Technically, the arrangement was complete. No further interaction was expected or required. But still, his thumb hovered over the screen, as if waiting for permission to want something more. He did not press call. Instead, he got dressed and left the apartment, hoping the cool air outside would make his thoughts clearer. Seattle was its usual mix of gray skies and restless movement. But for the first time in weeks, Julian felt disconnected from it all. Not because something was missing, but because something unexpected had clicked into place, and then vanished. Over the next few days, work returned to normal. Meetings, presentations, investor calls. Julian performed flawlessly, as always. But there was a dullness behind the precision. He was focused, but not present. Sharp, but distant. His assistant even asked, half-jokingly, "Did you leave your soul at that party?" Julian smiled. "Maybe I did." Meanwhile, Emilia had vanished as smoothly as she had appeared. No follow-up, no thank you text, no invoice reminder, nothing. She was a professional, she had done her job, and now she had moved on. But Julian had not. One evening, as he was reviewing a quarterly report, he noticed something tucked between the folders in his briefcase. A small white card. It was not from the agency. It was handwritten. 3 simple lines. "In case you ever stop pretending." Below it, a phone number. Julian stared at it for a long time. He had everything a person could want. Wealth, control, privacy. But none of those things made this decision easier. Because now, for the first time, the next move was not about strategy. It was about risk. Emotional risk. Did she mean it? Was it just a flourish, a poetic farewell? Or was she waiting, just like him? Julian picked up his phone, but this time, he did not hesitate. He dialed. The line rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Hello?" Julian paused. He had imagined this moment, rehearsed it in his head, but all he could say was, "Hi, it is me." A beat of silence. Then Emilia said softly, "I was hoping it would be." Julian let out a breath he did not know he had been holding. "I found your note. I wondered how long it would take. I did not know if it was real." Emilia's voice was calm. "Neither did I. But then, most real things start out feeling fake." Julian sat down, gripping the phone a little tighter. "I do not know what this is," he said honestly. "But I know I want to find out." Another pause. Then she said, "So do I." For the first time since that party, Julian felt something settle inside him, not excitement, not relief, but clarity. Whatever this was, it was no longer part of the plan. And maybe, just maybe, that was the best part. They agreed to meet the following Sunday afternoon. No tuxedos, no sparkling lights, no staged perfection, just 2 people sitting across from each other at a small cafe tucked between old bookstores in Capitol Hill. Julian arrived early. He had always been early. Control was a habit he could not shake, but this time, it felt different. He was not here to lead a meeting or close a deal, he was here to listen. To feel, maybe even to hope. When Emilia walked in, she was not wearing emerald green or designer heels. She wore jeans, a sweater slightly too big for her frame, and no makeup except for a faint gloss on her lips. And yet, Julian could not look away. She spotted him, smiled, not the practiced smile, but the real one. He stood up, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. They just looked at each other, as if seeing something new. "Hi," she said, simple and soft. "Hi," he replied. They sat down, and the silence that followed was not awkward, it was comfortable. Expected. Earned. Julian broke it first. "Thank you for the note," he said. "I did not expect it, but I am glad you left it." Emilia nodded. "I was not sure if I should, but I figured, why not take a chance?" Julian looked at her carefully. "That is not what professionals usually do, is it?" She smiled gently. "No, but I stopped feeling like a professional that night." There it was, the line between fake and real, crossed and acknowledged. They ordered coffee, talked about small things first. Childhood stories, favorite movies, places they had traveled, and those they still wanted to see. Julian found himself laughing more in that 1 hour than he had in weeks. Not the sharp, rehearsed laugh he used in meetings, but a genuine, boyish chuckle he barely recognized in himself. And Amelia, now removed from the elegant persona she wore like armor, was warm and quietly radiant. She told stories with her hands. She asked questions that mattered. She listened with intention. Eventually, the conversation slowed. The silence returned, but this time, it carried weight. Julian set his cup down. "Can I ask you something honest?" Amelia leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Always." "That night at the party, was any of it real for you?" She did not look away. "More than I expected." Julian nodded slowly. "Me too." Amelia hesitated. "But this is different now, Julian. There is no contract, no obligation. I am not here to impress your ex. You are not here to prove anything." He leaned in. "Exactly. And that is why I wanted to see you again." She watched him for a moment. "You are used to planning everything, aren't you?" "I am," he admitted. "But this, I do not want to plan. I want to feel it. I want to see where it leads." She smiled. "That is probably the most real thing you have said all day." They sat in silence again, but this time, something unspoken had shifted. Not attraction, not curiosity. Connection. When they left the cafe, Julian offered to walk her home. They wandered through the neighborhood slowly, talking about nothing and everything. When they reached her apartment building, she paused at the steps. "This was nice," she said. "It was more than nice," Julian replied. She looked at him, and he could feel the weight of the decision in her eyes. "I do not usually do this," she said. Julian raised an eyebrow. "Invite your clients for coffee?" She smiled. "No, let them in." He reached out, gently took her hand. "Then let this be the first time," he said. For a moment, she said nothing. Then, she gave his hand a small squeeze. "Okay," she whispered. Julian did not kiss her. Not yet. That moment would come. But for now, they stood there, two people who started as strangers playing a part, now daring to explore something they had not planned for. Something real. Julian could not sleep. The words Amelia had said kept playing on a loop in his mind. Liking you might not be enough to survive everything outside of this. It was not a threat. It was not even a goodbye. It was the truth, one spoken gently, but one that echoed louder than any confrontation. He had spent years controlling outcomes, managing optics, eliminating risks. But this was not a business decision. This was the part of life he could not spreadsheet his way through. 3 days passed. Amelia did not call. She did not text. Julian wanted to believe it was just space, that she needed time. But deep down, he knew what space could become when left too long. So, he made a choice. He showed up at her apartment on a rainy Thursday evening, without a script, without a plan, just a soaked coat and a heart full of uncertainty. Amelia opened the door slowly. She looked surprised, tired, guarded. Julian spoke before she could say anything. "I cannot go back to pretending," he said. "I tried. I went back to my office, my routines, my safe decisions, but nothing felt real anymore, not after you." She stepped aside, let him in, but she said nothing. Inside, the apartment was quiet. A half-finished cup of tea sat on the coffee table. The air between them was thick, not with anger, but with the weight of everything unspoken. Julian took a breath. "I know your world is different from mine, and I know being with me puts a spotlight on you that you did not ask for." He looked her in the eye. "But I'm not afraid of that. I am only afraid of losing you because I stayed silent." Amelia crossed her arms, eyes searching his. "It is not just the attention, Julian. It is the imbalance. People look at me and see a label. They look at you and see status. Together, we are a headline waiting to be twisted." He stepped closer. "Then let us give them a different story." Amelia blinked. "You really think that is enough?" "I do not know," he said honestly. "But I would rather fight for something real than settle for something safe." For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, slowly, she unfolded her arms and reached for his hand. "I do not want to run," she whispered. "But I need to know this is not just a rebellion for you." Julian tightened his grip around her hand. "This is not a rebellion," he said. "This is the first decision I have made with my heart in a very long time." And just like that, the air shifted. Not because everything was fixed, not because the world outside would be kinder, but because they had finally chosen each other not as a performance, not as a plan, but as a possibility. Spring arrived quietly in Seattle, washing away the chill of winter rain. It had been nearly 3 months since the night Julian stood in front of Amelia's door, dripping wet and unapologetically vulnerable. That night changed everything, not in a grand, cinematic way, but in the quiet, subtle way that real change always happens. They had stopped pretending. And somehow, that was enough. The world around them did not suddenly become kinder. Rumors lingered like smoke. Some people still whispered behind Julian's back, questioning his choices, doubting his motives. But for the first time in years, he did not feel the need to prove anyone wrong. He was learning to live without the armor. Amelia was still herself, grounded, radiant, and full of quiet courage. She had left the agency not in shame, but in peace. She wanted to create something new, something hers. So she began teaching acting and communication workshops at a local community center, helping others find the confidence to express themselves. It was not glamorous, but it was real, and that made all the difference. Julian supported her quietly. He would pick her up after classes, bring her coffee, and sit in the back during her workshops, pretending to read while secretly watching her light up the room. She never noticed. Or maybe she did and simply let him have the illusion. They did not rush things. There were no grand gestures or public announcements. No one moved in with anyone. They simply built something steady, simple mornings, honest conversations, and a sense of peace that neither of them had felt in a long time. One morning, as sunlight spilled across Julian's kitchen, Amelia found something while folding laundry. It was the original agency contract, neatly folded, forgotten between 2 books on his shelf. Her name was printed beside his, with signatures that now looked like the beginning of a strange fairy tale. She carried it outside to the balcony where Julian was reading. "Do you want to keep this?" she asked. He looked up from his book, saw the paper in her hand, and smiled faintly. "I kept it as a reminder," he said. "A reminder of what?" "That even the most controlled plans can surprise you." She laughed softly. "That is one way to put it." He set the book aside and walked over. "Maybe it is time to let it go." Amelia nodded. "Want me to burn it?" Julian chuckled. "Only if you promise not to invoice me for emotional damages." That evening, they lit a small fire in the outdoor pit on his balcony. The paper curled and darkened slowly, the ink fading into faint gold embers. They watched in silence as the contract disappeared, leaving only the warmth of the fire and the glow reflected in their eyes. "Do you ever wonder how it would have gone if we had never met?" Amelia asked quietly. Julian thought for a moment. "Sometimes," he said. "But then I remember that pretending to love you was what taught me how to actually do it." Amelia looked at him, no pretense, no defense. "Good answer," she whispered. A week later, Julian was invited to speak at a charity gala, ironically the same kind of event that had once defined his image. This time, he spoke not as a millionaire selling success, but as a man sharing what he had learned about connection, vulnerability, and the courage to begin again. He told the audience, "We spend our lives chasing what looks good, but sometimes the most valuable thing you will ever find is the one that feels real." From her seat in the audience, Amelia watched him, and she smiled not because he was performing, but because he was finally being himself. After the event, they met outside the venue. The city lights shimmered across the wet pavement. Julian reached for her hand and said, "You were right." "About what?" "That night at your apartment, you said liking someone might not be enough to survive everything. You were right, but choosing them every day might be." And Amelia looked at him, her eyes soft. "Then I guess we keep choosing." He nodded. "Scene by scene, no scripts this time." She smiled. "Deal." They stood there under the soft city glow, 2 people who had started as strangers, stumbled through pretense, and found something real in the process. The night was quiet, the moment unremarkable to anyone else. But for them it was everything. Because sometimes, love does not begin with fireworks or perfect timing. Sometimes, it begins with a plan that was never supposed to work, and ends with the kind of truth that does not need to be said out loud.